Advancing end-to-end Agile Resiliency. Topic of my conversation today with David Demers. He is a distinguished fellow with the Global Supply Chain Institute at the Haslam College of Business, University of Tennessee. David, welcome.
Thank you, Bob.
So you've just done a study on this whole topic of advancing end-to-end Agile Resiliency. What prompted the launch of this study in the first place?
It actually was an interesting starting point. A close colleague of mine over the last 30 years called me just before we were really in trouble with COVID, and suggested that I do something about this in the sense of trying to look at what do we need to do to adjust our supply chain strategies to accommodate disruptions. And I suggested maybe he should do that, but he pushed it back in my court. And when we explored that idea, we really focused in on the need to really examine the new competencies that we'll need going forward in our supply chains. So I touched base with my colleagues at UTK, and we agreed that we should take a deeper view of it.
Okay, now you're taking a view of something. End-to-end supply chain is a pretty familiar phrase.
Yes.
Everybody uses it.
Right.
It's hard to understand exactly what it is. What would be your definition of a true end-to-end supply chain?
Yeah, in our context, the scope we're looking at would be from tier 1, tier 2, or even tier 3 suppliers, all the way through the conversion process out to end consumers or customers.
Okay. I also understand that you're trying to look at it from the standpoint of value creation. What does that mean to you, and why is that so important?
I think it's really important in that, as we thought about the approach on this, many people think about disruptions as a passing period, and you want to get through it as quickly as you can, and you want to have at least a position where you are not losing value. But our intention was to look at what do we need to build in the operating model design that allowed you to actually create competitive advantage and deliver value. And value in our definition is value in the context of customers and also of shareholders and employees. So we measure that value in a unique way to quantitatively look at whether or not we did succeed in doing that.
Okay. Another definition.
Yes.
What is Agile Resiliency?
A great question. And we very carefully chose those two words and brought them together. Agile is very familiar. It's demand driven and being able to move within the window of customer demand to meet that demand. But resiliency is also the secondary ability to be able to respond quickly in a situation like COVID, to be able to rebalance our system so that we can actually grow and protect value advantage in the industry.
Okay. But in order to understand what's going on, you have to be able to measure.
Yes.
How do you measure value created? It seems like such an abstract kind of concept.
Yeah. Well, again, a really important idea. If you think about a diamond, and on the four ends of that diamond, customer would be one category of outcomes. And there we're looking at the ability to deliver on time, complete, for example, traditional measures, but difficult to do in disruption periods. A second on the diamond would be capital. And in particular, we're looking at working capital flowing through the value chain and understanding whether or not that value creation opportunity for capital velocity is affected by the disruption period. And third would be the profitability or cost areas. And there we're looking at boardroom metrics that are important to shareholder value in both capital and cost. And then the fourth one is growth. And growth in our view is about being able to actually have an opportunity to take market share or to grow revenue. And we measure it in fairly unique ways, again, boardroom ways, looking at PE ratios, price earnings ratios. We have a unique measure called return on supply chain assets. which is essentially profit over the flow of working capital in your value chain, and then looking at share and revenue growth in that area. The difficulty is trying to do all four of those things simultaneously and be in the top quartile, top 25% in your vertical.
But at least you got some hard numbers to work with.
We use
important.
the financial databases of Thomson Reuters, and then we put our analytics over the top, and then quartile vertical industries or customized views.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the conclusions of the research. Give me the 10 critical capabilities that were identified in this research.
Yeah, this is a test of my memory of 10 capabilities, Bob, but let me kind of rattle through them. The first one is Agile Resiliency metrics. We all have regular metrics today. We're inundated with metrics, but here we're looking at, if you think about a shop floor control system, the key metrics that can allow you to predictively and reactively respond to changes that are occurring up and down the value chain. And those are different than what we've traditionally had. And it requires visibility to be able to go there and data analytics to understand it. Second is leadership. It was one of the most important areas. Leadership is being able to have a leader who's responsible for building the core competency of Agile Resiliency in the supply chain, and then having teams that work across functional lines. Third area up would be the command centers, and we see that in the language of our session here. It's not just digitalization; it's having the tools, the expertise, and the bandwidth of knowledge to be able to deploy those things. Again, a shop floor-like thing. The fourth one is agile resilient workflow engineering. And there we're looking at traditional order to cash or procure to pay, but looking for challenge areas, constraints that would be choke points during a disruption period. And then the fifth area are tools and methods. You know, in a storm like COVID, we need to have pit crews who can take the supply chain and quickly diagnostically look at the problem and bring it back on. And the next one is readiness scenarios. We can't be ready for all disruptions, but there are some that are really, really critical, and we need to have teams that have been on the playing field to be able to do that.
Okay.
The next one is networks, and we're looking at really, this is the big important problem now. What do we do to design agile resilient networks? And a lot of companies are going to re-examine whether or not local sourcing and how far down in the process they need to go on that. And the next one is actually scenario readiness, and that would be taking all of the decision makers through that area. And then the next two quickly are trading partner alignment. Bullwhip occurred rapidly in this disruption period, being able to integrate tightly with those trading partners. And then one team. Oftentimes we have barriers between the functions and our partners. And each of these in our study, we, in the practitioner's way, provided a guide on how to take apart that category and put it in place.
Got through them all.
I did.
Great. All right. Well, it's great that you've come up with these really interesting conclusions. You got the hard numbers and the deep dive into the true end-to-end supply chain. Agile resiliency becomes a big issue here. Thank you so much, David Demers. I really appreciate you speaking with me today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
We've been speaking with David Demers of the Global Supply Chain Institute at the Haslam College of Business, University of Tennessee. Thank you very much for watching.